This is part 3 of Motorgrader Operations. In this program, we'll look at operating techniques in an actual work situation. But first, let's go over 6 basic steps of Motorgrader operation. Steps that you will follow on just about all grading jobs. Step number 1, study the area. Picture in your mind what needs to be done on the first pass and the following passes. It's even a good idea to get out and walk the job before you begin working. Look for washouts, holes, or anything that could interfere with the operation. Note the locations of underground utilities or low-hanging tree limbs and power lines. Step number 2. Position the grader. Exactly how you line up the grader depends on the job, but most often you'll put the grader directly in front of the work or just off to the side. Now the third step. Set the blade. Adjust the height, angle, and pitch of the moldboard, and if necessary, side shift the blade or circle so you can reach the work area more easily. The fourth step, select the transmission gear that will carry you through the pass without lugging or overloading the engine. Use a low gear for harder cuts and heavy material, and use a higher gear for lighter loads. Alright, the fifth step. Drive straight ahead using front wheel lean, frame steering, or both to keep the grader from side drifting. And finally, the sixth step. Once you get going, make as few changes on the blade setting as possible. Constantly adjusting the blade on a working pass will make your cuts uneven. Try to get it right the first time. All of these steps will become second nature to you once you gain more experience on the grader. There is one more point I wanted to mention. Use your seatbelt. Nothing adds more to your safety than the few seconds it takes to buckle up. Okay, now let's look at using the grader on some common maintenance operations. We'll start with grading shoulders. Here's how you want to end up. A smooth shoulder, flush with the edge of the pavement, and sloped away from the road so water can run off easily. To do all of that, you have to make 2 passes. On your first pass, you want to pull the material from the edge of the shoulder and windrow it up to the edge of the road. That requires a fairly sharp blade angle, about 45 degrees, with the toe of the blade set to the outside edge of the shoulder and the heel set near the edge of the pavement. The idea on the first pass is to maintain the original slope of the shoulder while cutting into the surface just enough to remove ruts and vegetation. Slight downward pressure on the blade is usually enough. Notice the wheels lean in the direction he's moving material. That keeps the grader going in a straight line. Now, for the second pass. You have to pick up the windrow and spread it back across the shoulder. That means changing the blade angle. You still need an angle of 45 degrees or so, but now you want the toe of the blade set at the edge of the pavement. As you spread the material, keep the heel of the blade loose so it won't leave a windrow at the bottom of the shoulder. The important thing on the second pass is to make the shoulder flush with the edge of the road. There shouldn't be any drop-off. To do that, you may have to set the blade a couple of inches over the pavement, but be careful you don't put so much downward pressure on the blade that it digs into the road. Keep your speed up and the moldboard pitched forward. That helps row, mix, and compact the material. When you're done with the second pass, ride over the shoulder a few times to compact it with the grader's tires. The next operation we'll look at is laying cold mix asphalt. This operation requires a good eye and a soft touch on the controls. Generally, the object is to fill in ruts and depressions that have formed on the old surface and restore the road to its original shape. On the first couple of passes, angle the blade to about 20 degrees with the toe set flush to the surface and the heel set slightly higher. That will pull the mix toward the center of the patch. Use a forward blade pitch to help roll and compact the mix as it comes off the moldboard. For the finishing passes, use a flatter blade angle almost straight across the grader frame. Set the height of both ends of the blade to match the shape of the road. If there is a slight elevation or crown, you have to maintain that shape. Pay special attention to the edges of the patch. Get them even with the surrounding surface. If the edges aren't flush, you'll end up turning a dip in the road into a bump in the road. Even though the patch will be compacted with a roller when you're finished, you should still try to leave the patch as smooth as possible. Avoid changing the blade setting or shifting gears during a pass. That could rough up the surface and interfere with getting a good final compaction. Now for pulling ditches. Whether you're digging a new ditch or reshaping an old one, the objective is the same: to improve drainage from the road and shoulder. On this job, the operator has to reshape an existing ditch. To do this, he sets the grader on the foreslope and angles the blade about 45 degrees. The toe of the blade is set at the bottom of the ditch just behind the front wheel. The idea is to pull material from the bottom of the ditch, spread it up the foreslope, and leave a windrow at the edge of the shoulder. Use front wheel lean to keep the grader going in a straight line. Remember to lean the wheels away from the ditch and toward the side you're moving the material. After you pull the ditch, position the grader, set the heel at the bottom of the ditch and the toe of the blade on the back slope. And again, use a blade angle of about 45 degrees. In back sloping, you're interested in reshaping the slope. It requires a tight blade, pitched upright or slightly back. Generally, you're moving a lot of material, so be careful where you place the windrow. If you're working with an articulated grader, you can usually place the windrow outside the rear tires and at the bottom of the ditch. But on a rigid frame grader, you'll have to side shift the circle to reach the back slope. That means leaving the windrow inside the rear tires. When you're finished with the bank, you'll have a rigid back slope and all of the material will be in the bottom of the ditch. So what's the next step? You guessed it, pulling the ditch. Move the material out of the ditch and windrow it to the shoulder. After that, it's a matter of spreading the windrow of material to get a smooth foreslope flush with the outside edge of the shoulder. And that's it. You end up with a clean ditch and reshaped slopes ready for reseeding. Now, a couple of points about working slopes. Any slopes. Anytime you work on a slope, there's a danger of rolling the grader, so keep the blade extended on the downhill side. The blade will help keep you from rolling over. And try to keep a full load of material on the blade. That way, if there's a washout ahead, the blade can fill it up before you ride over it with the rear wheels. A motor grader can be used on many more field operations than the ones we've seen here. But every operation involves some of the basic techniques we've covered. What you need now is a lot of hands-on practice. We've given you the basics in this program, but skill in operating the grader comes only from practice, practice, and more practice. Then, one day, you can become one of the few equipment operators who can operate a motor grader.